Hello and welcome to our special coverage of the NPC and CPPCC sessions underway in Beijing. I'm Wang Yizhi. We'll soon be going live to the Great Hall of the People in Beijing, where the second plenary meeting of this year's NPC session is about to open. In about 30 minutes, China's top legislator Zhang Dejiang will deliver the annual work report of the NPC Standing Committee, outlining its achievements and future plans. For analysis on the report and China's top lawmaking body, we're now joined in the studio by Professor Li Zhaojie from Tsinghua University and Mr. Edward Lehman, the managing director of the law firm Lehman, Lee & Xu. Welcome to this special coverage, gentlemen. Let's start with you, Professor Li. Give us an idea, especially for our international viewers who are not really familiar with China's political system. What do the NPC Standing Committee do? What's their duties, their obligations, as well as rights?
Well, NPC Standing Committee is mainly regarded as one of the main lawmaking bodies in China. So their chief responsibility and also their, we say, obligations are to make laws that can be enforced in China. So right now, China embarked on this, track of rule of law, and build up a rule of law country has become a national or state policy. These days, NPC Standing Committee is playing a very important role in that regard. As Zhang Dejiang, promised, that it showed its responsibility to improve the quality of the laws, they are about to make.
And also about the work report that is just about to announce in 30 minutes' time. Mr. Zhang Dejiang will talk about the achievements and future plans. What are your expectations from this report?
Well, I mean, I think it's an ambitious outline of what's been accomplished. What's been accomplished has been very ambitious. Looking at things like environmental law, looking at things like taxation, looking at the new constitutional law day that they're going to be having. So they're promoting these kinds of things. I think for our international viewers, just to understand, I mean, a lot of these are announcements about laws, and this is where we want to be. It's different than in a common law jurisdiction where they pass these laws and then they're tested in the courts, and then we have stare decisis, which decides how they're to be implemented. So what this is going to be an announcement as to what they've accomplished and what these laws are, and then how they're to be implemented. Then will be left up to the bureaucracy to be able to institute those kind of things. But these are the things that will be addressed, and like I said, I think it's moving in the right direction.
Some of the decisions and laws are from the motions by the NPC Standing Committee. So, Professor Li, give us an idea to our international viewers. How does motions come into being, and how does the motions going into a law?
Well, it's pretty similar to the motions, in the United States Congress or in other countries' legislative bodies. Motions, as we understand, are sort of legislative proposals put forward by a special body. Well, in China, according to the legislative law, law is made by means of motions, and those motions, well, the eligible bodies who are able to put forward motions could be, representatives of the National People's Congress, but they cannot do that, by a single person. They have to have, 30, representative or more. And other state apparatus, like a state council, like the military agencies, like other, bodies or institutions of the state, they can also, make motions. And they make motions, they submit the motions to, we call it Presidium of the National People's Congress. So they will sort of consider, they will deliberate those motions. If they think these motions are very good, proposals and suggestions, they will put forward to the National People's Congress for further deliberation. And a lot of motions at that stage, passed and then become law later. And some other motions may fail to pass because they may be considered not that good.
As a very important form of China's democracy, the system of the NPC Standing Committee, their motions reflected some of the views from the general public. So how would you review the work of NPC Standing Committee in terms of reflecting the public's opinions?
Well, in that regard, I think a lot of improvements still need to be done because in the past, motions were primarily put forward by those state apparatus. They may not that represent the interests of the people. They may deal with more or less the sort of realm of their responsibilities. So I think to improve this kind of work, we should encourage more motions to be put forward, submitted by the representatives themselves.
But I think what we're also seeing, though, just to try to clarify for the audience, so you got the standing committee, which is there and meeting all the time, and then we've got the NPC, which only meets a short period of time, between 10 and 14 days each year. I'm often thought about Otto von Bismarck's quote about law. How is law made? Two things you don't want to see made is sausage and law. So it's a very difficult process. I mean, I think to explain in any country. So I think it comes in through a variation of different ways. Like Professor Lee said, that each of these members must get, to have a motion, have to get 30 signatures from other members of the NPC. But there's a lot of weighing in by other parts. I think also the big progress that I've seen, and I've been looking at this, been commenting on it for the last 14 years, is on the National People's Congress in the Lianghui, is that they are now putting a lot of these laws on their website, and they're actually inviting comments from the public as well as experts and other people. Now, before they were asking for input from experts, but the question is who are the experts they're going to ask about. So I do think that that's been rather progressive. I mean, I think the other thing that international viewers have to understand, this is the largest parliament in the world, so it's about 2,987 people, and it's very difficult to try to manage this large operation. And so it's done partly by the National People's Congress, and then it's broken down that way as well.
But we are seeing a lot of motions that are reflecting public's opinions that are made into law. For instance, in 2014, we're seeing a revision of the Environmental Protection Law. We saw an establishment of a law called Air Pollution Prevention and Control Law. What are the highlights, do you think, in last year's?
Well, I think what we've had environmental protection laws on the books for quite some time. I think now they're really taking it seriously, meaning that there has been this huge controversy that this is a very difficult place for pollution in China, especially in Beijing. I think it was toothless, meaning that there were laws on the books, but it wasn't there wasn't a cost-benefit analysis to enforce that. And I think that what we've seen now is this is a huge priority for Xi Jinping, and it's a huge priority for the country. So I think that's a big step forward with this law and the variation on it.
Professor Lee, what do you think are the most pressing issues, the most daunting challenges for the government in this year's work?
Well, generally speaking, I think the daunting challenge is still to promote the institutional capacity of the government. In that regard, I think pollution, anti-corruption, to further develop the country's economy in these very difficult days. These are very daunting challenges. Also, another very important aspect is this reform to our judicial system to make it more viable, effective, efficient, authoritative, and credible, in order to bring justice to people, all the people in this country.
Thank you very much for both the analysis. Let's go live. Let's take a look at this background information. 2014 marks the first year of China's efforts of comprehensive deepening reform and a promotion of the rule of law. China's top legislature, the National People's Congress, and its Standing Committee amended and enacted a series of laws and regulations to propel reform. Let's take a look at what they accomplished so far.
In 2014, the NPC celebrated its 60th anniversary while working towards comprehensive deepening reform and strengthening the rule of law. To promote economic development, the NPC Standing Committee revised a series of law and regulations, including the budget law and insurance law. The committee also delegates partial authority to examine and approve economic projects to local governments. Special courts were established to hear cases of intellectual property rights in a bid to safeguard the country's emerging high-tech industry. At the end of 2014, the top legislature also gave the go-ahead for easier investment rules in 3 new free trade zones that are set to be established in South China's Guangdong and Fujian provinces and North China's Tianjin City. The committee revised workplace safety law, implementing fines of up to $810,000 on businesses at fault for serious accidents. Food safety inspection also were increased. The new environmental protection law were passed last April and sets environmental protection as one of the country's most important policies. To safeguard China's national security, the committee passed a counter-espionage law specifies that grants security agencies the power to ask an organization or individual to stop activities considered harmful to national security. In September 2014, the committee passed a granted universal suffrage to Hong Kong residents for the Legislative Council in 2016 and the Chief Executive election in 2017. In addition, a series of Memorial Day has been set up, including the Nanjing Massacre Memorial Day. December 4th also marked China's first Constitution Day, an effort to celebrate the rule of law.
Coming back to our studio discussion now with our guest, Professor Li Zhaojie. He is from Tsinghua University, and Mr. Edward Lehman, the managing director of the law firm Lehman, Lee & Shi. So my next question goes to you, Professor Li. Last year was quite productive. From the story we've just seen, the NPC Standing Committee has passed 15 motions and drafted laws were under review in 2014, while over 20 laws were revised. So pretty productive for the NPC.
Right. I think that, to have, rule of law country built up, the first job is to have a good legislature, to make good laws. I think, NPC in that regard has, made quite splendid achievements last year. But again, it's not enough. We're, as a lawyer, I'm also a professor of law. We're pretty, concerned about the qualities of the statutes, to make it more easy to be implemented and enforced. So in the past, our law, the sort of statutes, the provisions, the articles, were pretty much too vague, and that is, susceptible to abuse, to sort of, ignore. So we hope that we have, we can do, much better job to promote the quality of the lawmaking.
Right. Edward, Professor Li has mentioned the quality of the NPC's lawmaking process. What's your review on this?
Yeah, it's difficult because, again, civil law system, not a common law system. The civil laws were based on the German Code of 1896. That was the original setup of the laws here. Germans looked at law like science, and it's very difficult to do it that way because if it is vague, like the professor talked about, then it becomes very difficult. It's not necessarily evil, but what happens is the bureaucrats don't understand how it should be implemented. They're not given any more money for implementing it properly or for understanding how to implement it. Take, for example, the tax code in the United States. It's probably about this thick. And then you take the tax code here in China, and it's quite thin and it's ambiguous. And so as a result, there's a lot of loopholes. So you can interpret it in many different ways. And if you're not bound by case law to interpret how these should be interpreted, then it becomes very confusing. So I think a lot of Western viewers think, oh, this is evil somehow, but it's not. I mean, this is a new legal system that's grappling with it for the last 30 years. So, I mean, there should be applauded rather than demoralized with that. I think there's a long way to go, but it's moving in the right direction.
I'm glad we're sitting here talking about the importance of law. President Xi Jinping stressed in his speech last year about the importance of the rule of law. He said deepening reform must in compliance with the rule of law. What's the significance of this, Professor Li?
Well, I think, a country like China is such large in terms of the territorial size, in terms of population size. If, the people do not have a confidence in law, many things could easily go wrong. I think that's also the historical lessons that, we have well taken. We must have a rule of law to rein in. So we have rules to follow. This is, I think, one of the major pillars of the comprehensive reform program.
One major decision by NPC last year is to set up the National Constitution Day. Is it a common practice in international communities to set up such a day to promote the rule of law and the importance of Constitution?
Not so much in the United States, for example, to have a constitutional day. However, I mean, the basis and everything that springs from our understanding in law and education from when we're very small is the Constitution. And so people rely on that, and they say the First Amendment is the freedom of speech and the freedom of the press. Fourth Amendment is due process. So these things are inculcated, I think, from a very young age, even with regards to the patent law, which is mentioned in the Constitution of the United States in 1789. The first patent was signed by George Washington. So I think it's kind of a part of our whole understanding and legal system as we grow up, just as regular people. I think that this is a relatively new thing in China, and so I think this kind of a notion is a positive notion, and it should be done, and young people should learn it at a very young age, that this is a country of laws and regulations. I think the confusion is, in Chinese, when you say fa zhi and fa zhi, it could be rule of law or rule by law. This is where the confusion lies, and it's just two different characters that would denote it. And so I think that trying to differentiate that it should be rule of law, not rule by law, is very, very important, and that the law is the master, and the government and the citizens are the slaves to that law, and so it's equal for all of us.
Professor Lee,
I absolutely agree with him. I think that Constitution Day is particularly important as a reminder that we do have a constitution, and the responsibility of the government is to see constitution very much complied with. It's we call it a fundamental law. Nothing can be sort of come into conflict with the constitution. Everyone, including the ruling party, must conduct its activities within the framework of the Constitution. So, Constitution has the supremacy over all other laws. And I think to make that day as Constitution Day is to remind people this preeminent and important matter of Constitution.
The law of laws. Let's go live to our reporter now. The chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress will give his work report soon. We first cross live to our reporter Ai Yang at the Media Center. Ai Yang, give us a preview of today's agenda and the speech by Zhang Dejiang.
I'm standing in the main room of the Great Hall of the People right now. The chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Zhang Dejiang, will soon deliver a top legislature work report. And actually, about 10 minutes ago, this work report is already available to the press, both in English and in Chinese. And here with me, I have the English version of the report. Altogether, there's 26 pages. Seems like a pretty long report. We know this top legislature work report will first give a review of the tasks completed in 2014, and then also Zhang Dejiang will give a preview of the tasks to be completed in 2015. We know that last year lawmakers revised a number of very important laws. For example, they revised the budget law, and now they have made the budget law and government spending much more transparent to the public, and also local government borrowing now is required to strictly follow the procedures of the new budget law. And also last year the legislators revised the environment protection law, the food safety law, the advertisement law, and so on. We know that this year is regarded as the beginning of the comprehensive promotion of the rule of law, so likely we will hear Zhang address this issue as well. And after his report, another very important report right after that will be the vice chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Li Jianguo's report, and this is actually an explanation on the draft amendment of the legislation law in China. And this is actually, during the two sessions this time, the NPC deputies will give a third and final reading of the draft amendment of the legislation law. This law is actually regarded as the second most important law in China after the Constitution. That is because the legislation law regulates how government regulations, local laws as well as national laws are made, and this is the first time in 15 years for the legislation law to be revised after it was enacted in 2000, and it is widely regarded as a step closer to realizing the rule of law. Some of the highlights of the amendment include that in the future, provincial cities will be given legislative powers as well, because so that they can better make local laws to address local social issues. Back to you.
Well, Aiyang, we're now halfway through China's annual political season. What should we look forward to in next week's meetings?
Well, the deputies and CPPCC members still about have a week's time to submit further proposals, motions and suggestions. So far, the top advisory body has received 1,500 proposals. The top 3 topics are related to finance and economy, law and politics, as well as agricultural development. And in the next few days, the deputies and members will also hear to other very important reports delivered by the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate. And these reports will cover very important issues, for example, the ongoing anti-corruption campaign in China. Back to you.
Thank you very much. That was for reporter Aiyang in the Great Hall of the People. Now let's go back to our studio discussion with Professor Lee and Mr. Edward Lehman. We were talking about the rule of law, and the great question is, how about in the implementation?
Right. I mean, the implementation, that's where, you know, the devil is in the details, or God is in the details with regards to implementation. Like I said, I mean, for bureaucratic workers, once the laws are written, there's really no incentive for them to actually understand it. So it takes, I mean, what I think the international viewers don't necessarily understand is they write the laws, policies, and regulations, then they're trying to implement them, then they wait for implementing regulations sometimes, which could take months, and then there's Supreme Court interpretations. Just to make clear, Supreme Court interpretations are not case law, but they're actually policies and guidelines written by the Supreme Court to try to understand how these are to be implemented by people. So I think that this is a longer process than in most common law countries where we can understand it straight away. So Roe versus Wade about abortion, it just says this is how it's legal or illegal, and this is how we move forward. It's interpreted by the courts. Here we've got to interpret it bureaucrat by bureaucrat, so it's very difficult sometimes to implement it.
Professor Lee, what are the loopholes and obstacles that we're seeing right now in China to implement a law and to strengthen the rule of law?
Well, I think one of the most important things is to have a very authoritative, credible, effective and efficient judiciary to be able to administer rule of law. That is probably one of the drawbacks that we've been experiencing, these days. So in order to correct that kind of a situation, we know the 4th five-year plan for judicial reform is underway. And early this year, they come up with this, very comprehensive measures to be reformed. So there are 7 aspects in the 65 measures just to make our judiciary more accountable, to the rule of law. For instance, we must guarantee that judiciary power must be independently, impartially exercised. We must make our judiciary, the operation system of judiciary, we call it adjudication centered. The court must adjudicate cases, and they must follow nothing but law, And also we must, train a good team of judges. Judges must be standardized, must be professionalized, must be specialized. There are many other, aspects. I think, one of the things is, how to prevent, avoid, inappropriate, political intervention. We've been sort of sick and tired by that kind of phenomenon for years, and that is really, I think, a very harmful threat to a healthy judicial system.
How should we strengthen supervision?
Again, I think it has to be done by the judiciary. It has to be independent by the judiciary. I think people have to be held accountable. I think what I see is frustrating being in a law practice here in China is that sometimes there will be a trial and it'll be adjudicated by judges, a panel of judges of 3, generally speaking. And then people who are not in the courtroom will weigh in and have influence, and that haven't heard the facts and haven't heard the judges, the testimony and the evidence. The other thing that I think is very difficult with regard to overseeing a lot of this is if you don't have a very clear plan on civil procedure on how to run evidence to go into the court and how to have due process with regard to how these are to be administered. So in some cases, for example, we'll have a trial and then evidence will be presented after the trial has been completed, and then judgment will come after there's been some influence by maybe a manager or someone who runs the court system that wasn't in the courthouse. So I think these kind of things need to be addressed. This is where the loopholes, in my opinion, is to actually practically run how the implementation of the laws are in the courts.
Professor Lee, are you optimistic about China's judicial system's future in terms of an improvement in the rule of law and also the anti-corruption campaign?
Well, generally speaking, people like me optimistic. We are also call ourselves measured optimistic because of daunting challenges we're being faced with. For instance, the phenomenon of miscarriage of justice, and for a period of time was rampant. If you tolerate this kind of phenomenon, to go on, as I said here the other day, China dream will become China nightmare. So that is a very important thing to tackle. Corruption. Right now, anti-corruption campaign is a very important. It has been sort of welcomed and supported by the people by and large. But it's still within a political campaign. It's not a sort of institutionalized anti-corruption. So Xi Jinping made it very clear. We should establish an institution within which those officials are not willing to be corrupt, are not daring to be corrupt, and also are not able to be corrupt. We still have a long distance to go from here.
Of course we do. Well, let's talk about the legislation law. Our reporter Ah Young has just mentioned. She has already mentioned that the provincial government will be giving more legislation power. How important is this?
No, I think it's important because it has to come down to the local administrators. I mean, we've seen this in the past, just so you know. I mean, at one point, for example, the death penalty was, they were able to make local decisions in the provinces with regards to death penalties. That didn't work out, and so then they decided to make all of the Supreme Court decisions about the death penalty to be reviewed at the central government level. So this is another attempt to do that, and I think it's ultimately it has to go into the local and provincial level, and I think it has to be countrywide. It can't be just the central government making this effective. And so I think if it's going to be saturated across the whole country, this is inevitable. This is the way that it has to be.
Professor Lee, what's your take on this?
Well, I think with the other day, both of us were here in the old building addressing that kind of a very sensitive issue. I think you're quite right. Another matter I think that's also important and related is how to sort of put the power of the executive, the other apparatus of the state within the limitation of law. We call it to sort of check and balance and contain what these days quite a popular word, their caprice. So to make it sort of to make their exercise of their function, their authority, their power within the limitations of law. And that is so important these days as I see it.
All right, we're about to go live to the press conference where the chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Zhang Dejiang, will be giving his work report of 2014. He will be wrapping up some of the achievements from NPC Standing Committee in 2014, as well as giving out some plans that are guiding China's development strategies, as well as future plans. Now let's go live to the Great Hall of the People. The NPC has been laying legal groundwork for reform over the last year in line with plans laid out by the new leadership. A raft of laws were amended to help the government push ahead with its reform agenda. Issues range from the new free trade zone in Shanghai to abolishing the re-education through labor system and relaxing the one-child policy. The chairman of the NPC Standing Committee, Zhang Zhejiang, is about to deliver his work report. Take a listen.
Fellow delegates, today is March the 8th, International Women's Day. On behalf of the National People's Congress, to all the women here in China and internationally, we'd like to give you a warm holiday greeting. Fellow delegates, today's plenary session, a total of 2,900 people should be here. 89 people are absent. Now the meeting begins. There are a total of 2 agendas for today. First, we go to the first agenda of the day. Now welcome Chairman of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, Zhang Zhejiang, to give a report on the work of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress. Fellow deputies, now on behalf of the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, I now present to you this report on the work of the Standing Committee for your deliberation. Major work of the past year. In 2014, under the firm leadership of the Central Committee of the Communist Party of China with Comrade Xi Jinping as General Secretary, the Standing Committee has been comprehensively implementing the guidelines of the 18th National Party Congress and the 3rd and 4th plenary sessions of the 18th CPC Central Committee. Following the guidance of Deng Xiaoping theory, the important thought of free represents and the scientific outlook on development are fully putting into practice the guiding principles from General Secretary Xi Jinping's major speeches. We've been focusing on the overall work of the party and country as we have performed our functions and powers in accordance with the law, fully playing our role as the country's highest organ of state power and conscientiously working to ensure the accomplishment of all our tasks as set forth by the second session of the 12th NPC. First, we have been upholding the leadership of the CPC and have enhanced our confidence in the system of people's congresses. The leadership of the party is the most essential feature of socialism with Chinese characteristics. In adhering to and improving the system of people's congresses, we must unwaveringly uphold the party's leadership and strengthen our confidence in the system. We must improve the system on the basis of upholding the party's leadership and develop it through practice to ensure it advances with the times. We have been upholding the party's leadership throughout every process and aspect of the work of the NPC. In upholding the party's leadership, we must first and foremost uphold the centralized leadership of the CPC Central Committee. In carrying out the work of the NPC, we must resolutely implement the party's line principles, policies, decisions, and plans. Work actively to make sure our thinking, our actions, and our politics all maintain a high degree of unity with the Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as General Secretary. and conscientiously safeguard the authority of the Central Committee. Over the past year, we have armed ourselves with the party's basic theories and used them as a guide in our practice and our work. Deepen our study and implementation of the guiding principles from the General Secretary Xi Jinping's major speeches, and strengthen the Standing Committee both theoretically and politically. These efforts have enabled us to align our thinking and action with the guidelines of the Central Committee, keeping us firmly heading in the right political direction. Strictly adhering to the strategic arrangements set forth by the Central Committee, we make coordinated plans that cover all aspects and major activities in the work of the NPC, including legislation oversight, decision-making, and the work regarding deputies, and ensured that all major policies, plans, and measures of the Central Committee were implemented. We improved the system of requesting instructions and submitting reports. For major issues and tasks in the NPC's work, the leading party members group of the Standing Committee promptly requested instructions from and submitted reports to the CPC Central Committee, and we carried out relevant work in accordance with the law and procedures. Upholding the party's leadership over people's congresses is for ensuring that the party can exercise leadership over the state and society through organs of political power. Secondly, we celebrated the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the NPC, and strengthened our sense of responsibility and mission in adhering to and improving the system of people's congresses. On September the 5th, 2014, the CPC Central Committee and the Standing Committee of the NPC held a commemorative meeting for the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the NPC. General Secretary Xi Jinping delivered a keynote speech at the meeting, in which he reviewed the historic changes in China's political system since modern times and expounded on the historical necessity for the establishment of the system of people's congresses in China. He pointed out that this system provides a fundamental institutional arrangement for integrating leadership by the party, the position of the people as masters of the country, and the law-based governance of the country. It is a fundamental political system underpinning China's governance system and capacity for governance. He also made it categorically clear that we must firmly adhere to this system and improve it in step with the times. Keep to the socialist path of political development with Chinese characteristics, and continue to expand socialist democracy and promote socialist political progress. We held a seminar on theory in celebration of the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the NPC, guided by the important principles from General Secretary Xi Jinping's above speech, at which we systematically reviewed China's 60 years of experience implementing the system of people's congresses. This invaluable experience has shown us that we must uphold the leadership of the CPC and ensure it leads the people in governing the country effectively. We must uphold the people's principal position in the country and support and ensure their exercise of state power through the people's congresses. We must remain dedicated to the historical mission of rejuvenating the country and focus our energy in carrying out socialist modernization. We must exercise governance of the country on the basis of law and build China into a socialist rule of law country. We must improve and develop the system of people's congresses in light of China's specific conditions. And we must adhere to democratic centralism and give full play to the features and strengths of the system of people's congresses. We must always keep these lessons firmly in mind and constantly build on them. The NPC and local people's congresses at all levels organize various kinds of celebrations and commemorative activities to study, publicize, and implement the guiding principles from General Secretary Xi Jinping's speech. Encouraged and spurred on by these guiding principles, our deputies have increased their sense of motivation and resolve for keeping to the socialist path of political development with Chinese characteristics. Third, we held activities to celebrate China's first National Constitution Day and channeled great energy into promoting the spirit of the Constitution. The Constitution is China's fundamental law and provides a general charter for governing the country. On the eve of China's first National Constitution Day, General Secretary Xi Jinping gave important instructions. He emphasized that China's constitution is a good constitution, which is appropriate to the Chinese context, based in reality and in line with the development of the times, and that the Constitution provides the fundamental legal guarantee for ensuring that China and its people can withstand the test of any kind of difficulty and risk as they continue with resolve along the path of socialism with Chinese characteristics. He also stressed that we must remain committed to integrating leadership by the party, the position of the people as masters of the country, and the law-based governance of the country. Keep resolutely to the path of socialist rule of law with Chinese characteristics, and remain dedicated to upholding the authority of the Constitution and all other laws. In order to thoroughly study and implement the guiding principles from General Secretary Xi Jinping's important instructions, we held a forum on intensifying publicity and education on the Constitution, energetically promoting the spirit of the Constitution. At the forum, we emphasized that intensive efforts must be made to strengthen publicity and education on the Constitution, so as to instill the spirit of the Constitution into the hearts of the people, rally the people's will and energy, and ensure full enforcement of the Constitution, and that these efforts must be made in light of the modern and contemporary history of China, and especially the grand history of the CPC leading the Chinese people in the long period of arduous struggle, in light of the great achievements made in China's reform and opening up and socialist modernization. Second, we focused on the key task of improving the quality of legislation and gave full play to the guiding and motivating role of legislation. Legislation is an important function and power in a major task of NPC and its standing committee. The Standing Committee has given top priority to improving the quality of legislation, highlighted legislative priorities, accelerated the pace of legislative work, and improved the mechanisms for and effectiveness of legislation. Over the past year, we have deliberated on 20 drafts of laws, revised 10 laws, enacted 2 laws, and issued 8 legal interpretations. Number 1, we have made new progress on a number of major legislative items. The Environmental Protection Law is a fundamental and comprehensive law regarding the environment. On the basis of conducting in-depth research and broadly soliciting opinions, the Standing Committee approved comprehensive revisions to this law after deliberating 4 times on draft revisions. This was the first time this law has been revised since it was officially put into effect 25 years ago. In response to both general and prominent problems regarding environmental protection, revisions to this law has further clarified the government's supervisory functions and responsibilities, improved the systems for establishing ecological red lines, controlling the total amount of pollutants discharged, and making joint efforts across administrative areas to prevent and control pollution, strengthen the responsibility of enterprises for preventing and controlling pollution, establish systems for releasing environmental information, facilitating public participation in pollution control, and filing public interest litigation, strengthen accountability and administer harsher punishment for violations of the environmental law, The law also stipulates that people's governments at and above the county level shall report to people's congresses or their standing committees at their respective levels on environmental conditions and fulfillment of environmental protection targets every year. Administrative litigation, a system by which people bring the government to court, involves the exercise of government power and the protection of citizens' rights. In response to the new requirements of the new conditions, the Standing Committee made important revisions to the Administrative Procedures Law, which was the first time this law has been revised since it was enacted and put into effect 24 years ago. In revising the law, we paid a great attention to the protection of the legitimate rights and interests of citizens, legal persons, and other organizations, and helped to promote the law-based exercise of administrative power and impartial administration of justice, with a focus on resolving major difficulties in the filing and trial of administrative litigation and in enforcement of court rulings. We improved the administrative litigation system by expanding the scope of administrative litigation cases that can be filed, opening up the channels for filing such litigation, making adjustments to jurisdiction over such cases, and standardizing administrative litigation procedures, all of which help to better solve administrative disputes. The legislation law is an important law that concerns China's legislative system and legislative work. To satisfy the requirements for improving the legislative system and ensuring effective and democratic legislation, the Standing Committee promptly started working on revising the legislation law. We revised and improved the law with regard to a number of areas, such as giving full play to the leading role of people's congresses in making laws, improving delegated legislation, and endowing all cities divided into districts with legislative powers. After holding two deliberations, the Standing Committee has submitted the draft revisions of the legislation law to this session of the NPC for consideration. In addition, the Standing Committee formulated the waterway law, revised the military facilities protection law, and deliberated on the draft revisions of the food safety law, the advertising law, and the air pollution prevention and control law, the draft amendment number 4 to the criminal law, and draft revisions to the law on promoting the application of scientific and technological advances. Number 2. We help promote and implement major reform measures through legislation. We revised the budget law, which is of great importance to deepening fiscal and tax reforms and putting into place an all-around, standardized, open, and transparent budgeting system. After 4 deliberations, the Standing Committee made significant revisions to the budget law. We made comprehensive improvements to the law, making sure all government revenue and expenditure are incorporated into budgets, improving the system of transfer payments and the mechanism for local government debt management, making budgetary work more transparent, advancing performance-based budget management, and strengthening review and oversight by people's congresses over government budgets and final accounts. Acting in line with the newly revised budget law, the State Council made a decision on deepening reform of the budget management system, introduced measures to tighten management over local government debt, and stressed the need to manage public finances in accordance with the law and readily accept oversight. In order to aid the government in streamlining administration and delegating more powers to lower-level governments, the Standing Committee made revisions to relevant provisions of the insurance law, the securities law, the law on certified public accountants, the government procurement law, and the meteorology law, with a review to delegating the power or canceling the requirement for government review for certain items, thus providing a legal basis and support for reforming the system of government review. In order to put into effect the integrated approach to national security and accelerate the development of rule of law, in our national security efforts. The Standing Committee promptly adjusted its legislative work agenda to strengthen the following efforts. First, we changed original national security law into the counter-espionage law to strengthen anti-espionage work. Secondly, we deliberated on the draft of the new national security law to guide other laws on national security. Third, we deliberated on the drafts of an anti-terrorism law and a law on the management of international NGOs in China to increase the level of the rule of law in key areas of our national security efforts. Number 3. We worked hard to legislate more effectively and democratically. First, we made full use of the NPC's dominant role in legislative work. Relevant special committees of the NPC led the work of revising major laws such as the Environmental Protection Law, the Legislation Law, and the Administrative Procedures Law. Relevant special committees were involved in the drafting of laws by the State Council, the Supreme People's Court, and the Supreme People's Procuratorate, and jointly carried out research on major issues in the drafting of laws in order to ensure that these drafts are submitted on schedule. Second, we continue to attach equal importance to the enactment, revision, abolishment, and interpretation of laws. We made overall plans in enacting new laws and rescinding old ones, and improving coordination and consistency between laws. We strengthened interpretation of laws. We deliberated on and passed 7 legal interpretations on relevant provisions of the criminal law and the criminal procedure law, and formulated an interpretation on citizen name rights as prescribed in the general principles of civil law and the marriage law. Third, we improved the way we carry out legislative work. We refined our efforts to assess draft laws before their promulgation, strengthened debate over legislative items, improved the mechanism whereby legislative bodies of the Standing Committee maintain contact with NPC deputies, and invited NPC deputies to participate in activities such as research and deliberation on legislative items. We studied and drew on public comments and suggestions, and gave prompt explanations and feedback.
Thirdly, we made decisions on legal issues in accordance with the law and upheld the authority of the Constitution and all other laws. Acting in line with the Constitution and the other related laws, the Standing Committee promptly made decisions on a number of significant issues, thus ensuring that the Constitution and all other laws were properly enforced and smooth progress was achieved in related work. First, we made a decision on issues related to the selection of the Chief Executive of the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region by universal suffrage. Selecting the Chief Executive by universal suffrage is a significant issue in the development of the political system of the Hong Kong SAR. The NPC Standing Committee has a constitutional responsibility to ensure the proper enforcement of the basic law of the Hong Kong SAR and to advance the development of Hong Kong's political system in accordance with the law, and thus saw it as necessary to decide a number of key elements and relevant issues relating to the system for selecting the Chief Executive by universal suffrage. And pursuant to the basic law of the Hong Kong SAR and the Standing Committee's earlier interpretation of law and decisions on the selection of the Chief Executive, the Standing Committee adopted the decision on issues relating to the selection of the Chief Executive of Hong Kong SAR by universal suffrage and on the method of forming its Legislative Council in 2016. This decision provides the principles and direction for Hong Kong SAR to follow in developing concrete methods for selecting its Chief Executive by universal suffrage. The decision is thus of great significance for fully implementing the principles of one country, two systems, the people of Hong Kong governing Hong Kong, and the region enjoying maintaining a high degree of autonomy, to fully enforcing the basic law of the Hong Kong SAR, and to ensure that the Hong Kong develops democracy in a gradual and systematic way and successfully selects its chief executive by universal suffrage in accordance with the law in 2017. Number 2, we made decisions on carrying out trials of accelerated procedures for certain criminal cases and establishing intellectual property rights courts. In line with the CPC Central Committee's plans for deepening judicial structural reform, the NPC Standing Committee made decisions on authorizing the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Prokuratorate to carry out trials of accelerated procedures for certain criminal cases in some localities, and decision on establishing intellectual property rights courts in Beijing, Shanghai and Guangzhou, thus providing a legal basis and support for the efforts to improve criminal litigation procedures and systems of judicial protection of intellectual property rights. We also urged relevant departments to conscientiously and properly carry out their part of this work in accordance with the law, sum up their experience of the work, and report their progress to the Standing Committee. Number 3, we made decisions on authorizing the State Council to make provisional adjustments to the enforcement of certain laws in pilot free trade zones and in 33 pilot counties, county-level cities and districts. Acting in line with the Central Committee's reform decisions, and on the basis of careful deliberation of motions put forward by the State Council, the NPC Standing Committee adopted the decision on authorizing the State Council to make provisional adjustments to items requiring government review as prescribed by certain laws for the 3 new pilot free trade zones in Guangdong, Tianjin and Fujian, as well as for the extended areas of the China-Shanghai pilot free trade zone, and the decision on authorizing the State Council to make provisional adjustments to the enforcement of certain laws in 33 pilot counties, county-level cities and districts, including Daxing district of Beijing. All these 2 decisions provide a legal basis and support for advancing relevant reforms, embodying the principle of pushing forward with reform on the basis of the rule of law and increasing the level of rule of law through the process of reform. Number 4, we made decisions on instituting the National Constitution Day and Martyrs' Day. In the spirit of the 4th plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee, the NPC Standing Committee adopted the decision on instituting the National Constitution Day, establishing in law December the 4th as China's National Constitution Day, and further stipulating that the state should carry out various forms of publicity and educational activities pertaining to the Constitution. The establishment of the National Constitution Day is conducive to improving public awareness of the Constitution, fostering the spirit of the Constitution and strengthening the enforcement of the Constitution. In recent years, deputies to NPC, members of the National Committee of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference, and people from all sectors of society have in various ways made proposals and suggestions on establishing a national day to commemorate revolutionary martyrs and called for improvement in work related to the commemoration of martyrs. Therefore, the Standing Committee adopted the decision on making September the 30th Martyrs' Day. This is the 3rd Memorial Day established by the Standing Committee in accordance with the law, following the Victory Day in the Chinese People's War of Resistance against Japanese aggression and the National Memorial Day for the Nanjing Massacre victims. The solemn commemoration of such events through memorial activities has greatly promoted patriotism and core socialist values. The Standing Committee ratified, in accordance with the law, 13 treaties and agreements with foreign countries or international conventions that China concluded, and decided or approved appointments or removals for a number of employees of state bodies. Number 4, we made our oversight work more targeted and effective by adhering to a problem-oriented approach. In accordance to advance the implementation of major policies and plans of the CPC Central Committee and ensure proper and effective enforcement of the law, the Standing Committee practiced its oversight in accordance with the law, focusing on major issues concerning reform, development and stability, as well as difficult issues which had garnered broad attention from NPC deputies and the public. Over the past year, we listened to and deliberated on 13 work reports from the State Council, the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Proroctorate, investigated compliance with 4 laws, conducted 3 special inquiries, and carried out research on 4 special topics. First, we helped promote stable and sound development of the economy. The Standing Committee listened to and deliberated on State Council's report on the implementation of the 2013 Plan for National Economic and Social Development and the State Council's report on strengthening financial monitoring and regulation to prevent financial risks, and investigated compliance with the patent law and tourism law. With the increase of the domestic and international uncertainties and the coming of a new normal in China's economic development, we urge relevant departments to faithfully implement the decision and plans of the CPC Central Committee on economic work, stick to the principle of achieving a stable performance, while at the same time securing progress, and the idea of promoting reform and innovation, place even greater importance on great model transformation and structural adjustments, boost domestic demand and especially consumer demand, actively foster new economic growth areas, and enhance the quality and returns of economic along with its internal driving force. We improved the mechanism for coordinating financial monitoring and regulation efforts and effectively prevented and diffused financial risks. We have pressed ahead with a strategy of innovation-driven development by strengthening the application and protection of patents, investigating patent infringements and holding those involved accountable in accordance with the law, and encouraging industries to enhance their competitiveness by seeking progress in technological innovation and brand buildings. Efforts towards streamlining administration, delegating the power, or cancelling the requirement for government to review for more items and delegating more powers to lower-level governments have all drawn great attention from NPC deputies and the public. The Standing Committee listened to and deliberated on the State Council's report on deepening reform of the government review system and accelerating the transformation of government functions, and conducted a special inquiry on the matter. While fully acknowledging the achievements made thus far, the Standing Committee also pointed out that such problems as holding onto the power of review through hidden means, placing superficial work above real results, and ineffective oversight and poor service still exist in some local governments and government bodies. We emphasize that in order to solve these problems, the government must strictly enforce the administrative approval law, make substantive progress in streamlining administration and delegating powers, cancel non-administrative review, and comprehensively enhance the quality of public services it provides. The State Council acted accordingly to strengthen efforts in streamlining administration and delegating power to lower levels, and put forth new measures aimed at standardizing practices of review of State Council bodies, including work related to government review. 2. We strengthened review and oversight over budgets and final accounts. In performing its duty of conducting review and oversight over government budgets and final accounts in accordance with the law, the Standing Committee listened to and deliberated over reports on final accounts, auditing work and the implementation of budgets, and reviewed and approved the central government's final account for 2013. We require the State Council and the relevant departments to tighten our budgetary management by improving the system of managing all government revenue and expenditure, refining the system of government debt management, and increasing the review and the integration of special transfer payment. We also urge relevant authorities to rectify problems discovered in auditing and ensure accountability for them. Last December, the State Council reported to the Standing Committee on the rectification and handling of the problems discovered in auditing. According to the report, audited departments had rectified problems involving a total of 106.25 billion yuan. The amount of funds recovered or prevented from loss totaled 3.39 billion yuan. And 3,122 regulations were made or improved based on suggestions from the auditing bodies. The Standing Committee attached great importance to and oversaw the allocation and use of government funds for water conservancy. We made suggestions on increasing and effectively allocating government funds on water conservancy, improving the system of integrated water-related management, and the mechanism for sharing the cost of conservation and compensating for impact on water ecosystems, and strengthening management of government-funded projects and performance-based management. After overseeing the allocation and use of government funds for science and technology in 2013, we again oversaw allocation and the use of government funds in a particular area and a positive effort to strengthen budget oversight by the NPC. 3. We helped provide safeguards for and improve the standard of living. The social security system affects the most immediate interests of our people. Everyone is concerned about what kind of social security benefits they will be able to depend on in their old age. The Standing Committee listened to and deliberated on the State Council's report on coordinating efforts to develop urban and rural social security systems, and conducted an inquiry on the issue. We urge relevant government departments to strengthen top-level design, proactively respond to the issue of aging of the population, improve the system of government spending, divert some state capital to strengthen social security funds, make a unified national plan for basic pensions, strengthen supervision and oversight over the investments and operation of social security funds, improve the system for social assistance and accelerate the formation of a more sustainable and equitable social security system. Building a new countryside is a historic task in the course of China's modernization. General Secretary Xi Jinping has said on several occasions that rural living standards are the measures of success in our driving towards moderate prosperity in China. The Standing Committee has been continuously following up the work regarding agriculture, rural areas and rural residents. Last year we made promoting the building of a new countryside a topic for our oversight work and listened to and deliberated on a report concerning this issue. For deep-seated problems hindering agricultural and rural development, we stressed the need to improve the system and mechanisms for integrating urban and rural development, make the plan for building a new countryside more workable, forward-looking and inclusive, improve the long-term mechanism for physical and financial support, improve the infrastructure and living environment in rural areas, and comprehensively improve rural basic public services, thereby bringing fundamental changes to rural areas. In recent years, we have seen the frequent occurrence of accidents involving minors and crimes affecting their safety. That's an issue which has caused certain concern among NPC deputies and people from all sectors of society. In response to this, and with the emphasis being placed on the need to protect the safety of minors, the Standing Committee conducted a nationwide inspection of the enforcement of the law on the protection of minors. We pressed ahead for relevant government departments to work together in a coordinated way on this issue, strengthen the protection of minors, crack down on crimes against them in accordance with the law, and create an enabling social environment for caring for and protecting minors. In addressing judicial irregularities and other problems that have aroused great public concern, the Standing Committee reviewed and deliberated on reports of the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate on how to bring judicial and procuratorial activity in line with proper procedures and urge them to intensify efforts to regulate their activities, improve the credibility of the judiciary, and ensure that people feel justice is served in every case. At the suggestion of the Standing Committee regarding the above-mentioned reports, the Supreme People's Court took steps towards improve judicial work by stopping the practice of ranking higher People's Courts, reforming the system of adjudication committees and standardizing criminal sentencing, while the Supreme People's Procuratorate worked diligently on implementation of measures such as the launch of a year-long campaign to better regulate activities in procuratorates all over the country by focusing on 8 areas identified for improvement. 4. We worked to promote ecological progress. In response to strong public complaints about serious air pollution, the Standing Committee inspected the enforcement of the air pollution prevention and control law, focusing on key areas such as the Beijing-Tianjin-Hebei region, the Yangtze River Delta, and the Pearl River Delta. We work to ensure that the government and enterprises take responsibility for the prevention and control of air pollution and stress the need to focus on key areas, address problems at the source, better coordinate prevention and control efforts in affected regions, strengthen oversight and supervision over law enforcement, and crack down on illegal behavior. The State Council forwarded the comments of the Standing Committee to relevant government departments and local authorities, requiring them to carefully study the comments, actively contribute to the all-out drive to prevent and control air pollution, willingly accept the oversight of People's Congress, and earn people's trust by achieving real results. It was reported in the medium-term evaluation of the implementation of the 12th five-year plan that progress in meeting some obligatory targets set out in the plan for conserving energy and reducing emissions was behind schedule. To address these problems, the Standing Committee listened to and deliberated on a report of the current state of work concerning energy conservation and emission reductions. We proposed that conserving energy and reducing emissions should be regarded as important means of transforming the growth model and making structural adjustments, and this work should be carried out with a greater resolve and increased efforts. We improved the way we carry out oversight. We ensured oversight and legislation were more closely integrated. The Standing Committee made major revisions to the workplace safety law, increasing the responsibility of production and operations entities, and of government oversight and supervision, and intensifying investigations of accountability for workplace safety. At the same time, we listened to and deliberated over a report on the state of workplace safety. The Standing Committee inspected the enforcement of air pollution prevention and control law. The State Council conscientiously studied and adopted the comments and suggestions put forward by the Standing Committee on the basis of inspections, reviewed and the experience it had gained in implementing the action plan for the prevention and control of air pollution, then drafted revisions to the air pollution prevention and control law and submitted them to the Standing Committee for deliberation. We also conducted research on the prevention and control of soil pollution in order to facilitate work in this area and also prepare for enacting a soil pollution prevention and control law. Second, we improved the way we inspect the enforcement of laws. During our inspections of the enforcement of the tourism law, we combined our work of listening to reports and holding forums with random inspections and unannounced visits and integrated comprehensive inspections with follow-up inspections of and oversight over typical cases. We also report our finding both orally and via video at a Standing Committee meeting. Third, we improve our work on special inquiries. Members of the Chairperson's Council led teams to carry out research at the community level, held forums for deputies, conducted questionnaire surveys online, and made issues of common concern to all parties a focus of inquiries in order to fully reflect the concern of the people and community-level organizations. The State Council attached great importance to the special inquiries of the Standing Committee, and its leaders attended the meeting and earnestly responded to the inquiries, fully embodying the principle and the requirement that the government should be responsible to the NPC and should be subject to its oversight. We worked diligently to put on record and review normative documents. Over the past year, we reviewed one by one the 12 administrative regulations formulated by the State Council and the 50 judicial interpretations made by the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Prokuratorate. At the same time, we conscientiously looked into the comments made by various departments during the review.
Fifth, we respected the principal position of deputies and ensure and improve our services for them. Deputies to the NPC are members of China's highest organ of state power. Respecting their rights means respecting the rights of the people. In ensuring that deputies perform their duties in accordance with the law means ensuring that the people serve as masters of the country. The Standing Committee needs the support and participation of the deputies to do its work well. Number one, we increased our ties with the deputies to the NPC. We established and put into practice a sound system for members of the Chairperson's Council and members of the Standing Committee to maintain contact with NPC deputies. Members of the Chairperson's Council maintain direct contact with 87 deputies, and members of the Standing Committee maintain contact with 333 other deputies. Contact and communication with the deputies were maintained through meeting with them, calling them, and keeping up with written correspondence with them. We invited deputies to participate in Standing Committee activities, such as research on pending legislation and inspections of the enforcement of laws, and we listened to their comments and suggestions with an open mind. We continue to increase the participation of NPC deputies in the work of the Standing Committee. Last year, we invited more than 300 deputies to attend Standing Committee meetings as non-voting observers, and for the first time, we invited some deputies to take part in the preliminary review of China's annual draft budget and draft plan. We improved the system for keeping deputies informed about important work within the Standing Committee, the special committees, and the working committees, and solicited the opinions of deputies about relevant work. The State Council, the Supreme People's Court, and the Supreme People's Procuratorate maintained close ties with deputies and actively responded to the concerns of the deputies and the public. Number 2, we worked conscientiously in deliberating on deputies' proposals and handling their suggestions. Special committees complete deliberation on all 468 deputy proposals that were referred to them by the Presidium of the second session of the 12th NPC. The Standing Committee has deliberated on and adopted 6 legislative items addressing 23 of the proposals, has completed the implementation of 4 oversight tasks brought up in 5 proposals, and is currently deliberating on 6 legislative items mentioning 83 proposals, and has included 69 legislative items discussed in 160 proposals in the long-term or annual legislative plans. In the course of formulating and revising laws, we examined the items the deputies raised in their proposals, line by line, proposal by proposal, and invited deputies who had a leading role in each proposal to participate in research for pending legislation, as well as in assessments of laws prior to their promulgation. In deliberating on the draft Amendment 9 to the Criminal Law, the Standing Committee adopted all relevant suggestions set forth in 81 proposals submitted by deputies to this NPC. The 8,576 suggestions, criticisms, and comments submitted by deputies have all been handled, and feedback has been given to deputies by the departments handling them. 79.8% of the problems raised have been solved or plans have been made for solving them in due course. The General Office of the Standing Committee intensified coordination in and oversight over the handling of suggestions, selecting 19 key suggestions which have been distilled from 147 suggestions put forth by 611 deputies from 14 delegations. The competent special committees worked hard to oversee the handling of deputies' suggestions, while the departments handling suggestions conscientiously performed their duties, and their leaders actively took part in studies and discussions on how to handle suggestions. As a result, more than 100 policies and measures have been developed, aiding in the resolution of a number of major issues of immediate concern to the people. The State Council devoted an executive meeting exclusively to listening to a report on how deputy suggestions have been handled, and put forth the requirement that relevant departments must regard the handling of deputy suggestions as an integral part of improving their own work and accepting the oversight of the people. Number 3, we supported and ensured deputies' performance of their duties in accordance with the law. We encouraged local people's congresses to open up more channels for deputies to maintain contact with the people. Put forth guidelines on promoting close ties between deputies and the people through online platforms. Improved the system for deputies to maintain contact with the people. It supported deputies in fully giving expression to public sentiment and opinions from the community level. We organized research on special topics in which more than 1,900 NPC deputies, 65% of all deputies to the NPC participated and produced 117 reports. We diligently organized study and training activities for deputies and held 4 study sessions for NPC deputies, where nearly 1,000 deputies engaged in study and discussion, thereby enhancing the ability of deputies to perform their duties in accordance with the law. Number 6, we strengthen contact with local people's congresses, or work together with them to improve and develop the work of People's Congresses. Properly carrying out the work of People's Congresses under the new conditions requires the joint effort of the NPC and local People's Congresses. In recent years, the Standing Committee has laid stress on maintaining closer working relations with local People's Congresses, strengthening work coordination, and developing work exchanges, and has been able to achieve fresh progress in building up synergy in the whole system. Number one, we conducted research on the work and development of People's Congresses at county and township levels. The Standing Committee made it an important task to conduct research on the work of local People's Congresses and to improve and advance their work. In line with the principle of improving oneself by reviewing and learning from past experiences, we conducted research on the work and development of county and township level People's Congresses. Study groups led by members of the Chairperson's Council visited county and township level People's Congresses to obtain hands-on information about their work and development and discuss with them new ideas and good approaches for improving their work. The working bodies of the Standing Committee formed 7 teams to conduct research on the work and development of county and township levels People's Congresses in 31 provinces, autonomous regions, and municipalities directly under the central government, which then produced a number of valuable reports. The China Society for Theoretical Research on the System of People's Congresses also organized relevant seminars and contributed comments and suggestions in this regard. On the basis of these studies, we're planning to draw up guiding documents to help strengthen the work and development of People's Congresses at county and township levels and to revise and improve relevant laws in due course. Number 2. We increase efforts to provide study and training sessions and develop work exchanges. The Standing Committee held 4 study sessions for leading members of the Standing Committees of the county level People's Congresses, which were attended by over 1,100 county-level Standing Committee chairpersons or vice chairpersons from Jilin, Tibet, and 9 other provinces and autonomous regions, and achieved positive results. The Standing Committee invited leading members of the Standing Committees of provincial-level People's Congresses to attend all its meetings as non-voting observers, listen carefully to their comments and suggestions, and organize briefings on a regular basis to promptly inform them about the work of the Standing Committee. We held a national seminar on local legislation to summarize and exchange ideas about the good experiences and methods in the legislative work of local People's Congresses. We invited leading members of local People's Congresses, legislative affairs, bodies to observe meetings of the Standing Committee, the special committees and working bodies of the Standing Committee, strengthen their contact and exchange with relevant bodies of local People's Congresses through forums and training sessions. At the same time, local People's Congresses actively supported the work of the NPC and did a great deal to assist the Standing Committee in carrying out law enforcement inspections, conducting research for pending legislation, ensuring services for deputies, and carrying out foreign relations work, thus greatly helping raise the whole work of People's Congresses to a new level. Number 3, we solicited comments and suggestions from local People's Congresses and NPC deputies on the work of the Standing Committee and on the drafting of this work report. The General Office of the Standing Committee organized 12 research teams. These teams, each led by a leading official at the ministerial level, held forums in localities during which they solicited opinions from leading members of the Standing Committees of 31 provincial-level People's Congresses and from 549 NPC deputies and 35 delegations. The valuable comments and suggestions we collected during our studies are an expression of the concern and the expectations that local People's Congresses and NPC deputies have for the work of the NPC, and have been instrumental in helping us improve our work. Number 7. We coordinated our foreign relations, information, and publicity. We actively develop contacts with other countries, focusing on China's national development strategy and its overall interest in reform and opening up. We fully utilize the characteristics and advantages of the NPC's foreign relations and fully advance friendly exchanges and cooperation with the congresses and parliaments of other countries in order to serve the need of China's overall diplomatic work. First, we deepen the mechanism for regular exchanges. We successfully held the 8th meeting of the Cooperation Council consisting of the NPC and the Russian Federation Council, and established the new China-Russia Parliamentary Cooperation Committee consisting of the NPC, the Russian Federation Council, and the State Duma of Russia. We resumed regular exchanges with the Senate of the United States, advanced regular exchanges with the national parliaments and congresses of France, the United Kingdom, Germany, the Republic of Korea, Canada, Australia, and Chile, as well as the European Parliament, and established a mechanism for regular exchanges with the State Great Hero of Mongolia. Second, we conducted friendly foreign exchanges on multiple levels and in various ways. We successfully organized the first official visit to Peru, Colombia, and Mexico by chairperson of the NPC Standing Committee. Received 53 congressional and parliamentary delegations from countries such as Switzerland, Nigeria, Myanmar, and Kyrgyzstan. Increased exchange between NPC special committees and friendship groups on the one hand, and their counterparts in the national parliaments and congresses of other countries on the other. Played a constructive role in the Inter-Parliamentary Union, the Asian Parliamentary Assembly, and other parliamentary organizations, and appropriately arranged the overseas trips of the NPC Tibetan Delegation and NPC Youth Representatives Friendship Delegation. Through these efforts, we made friends in many places, and advanced cooperation and furthered friendship with other countries. Third, we made our foreign contacts more targeted, with a view to safeguarding the overall development of China's foreign relations and serving its national development strategy. We strengthened exchanges concerning state governance experience with our foreign counterparts, provided a good legal and policy environment for deepening China's pragmatic cooperation with other countries. Fourth, we shared both China's story and the story of the NPC. We helped international audiences better understand and identify with China's path of development, its basic national context, and its domestic and foreign policies. We strengthened the NPC's information and publicity work. Through the celebrations of the 60th anniversary of the establishment of the NPC, China's first National Constitution Day, and the 30th anniversary of the promulgation of the law on regional ethnic autonomy, as well as other important activities, we worked hard to enhance public knowledge about China's fundamental political system, its basic political systems, and the fundamental law of the country, by holding symposiums and forums, producing documentaries, and publishing chronicles of historic events. We work to better publicize and give deeper explanations on the NPC's work, such as its legislative oversight and diplomatic work, as well as its work related to deputies. We redoubled our self-improvement efforts. We consistently gave top priority to improving ourselves both theoretically and politically, so that we're firm on our shared ideals and convictions and our political standing. Strictly observe the party's political discipline and regulations, progress in our political awareness, and enhance our awareness of the overall interests of the nation, of shouldering responsibility and of daring to take on tasks. In compliance with the requirement to constantly improve conduct, we faithfully follow the CPC Central Committee's 8-point decision on improving party and government conduct. We improved the organization of standing committee meetings and arranged meetings according to the specific agendas at hand in an effort to raise the quality of deliberation. As members of the standing committee were more fully prepared. They were more eager to express their opinions at meetings, and the deliberations were better targeted and produced more tangible results. The system for collective study among members of the leading party members group of the Standing Committee was improved. Standing Committee seminars were better organized, and was ensured that subjects were carefully selected and decided. The principles of learning for the purpose of application integrating learning with practice. We improved our leadership over the work of special committees while giving full play to the role of these committees. Focusing on the central work of the NPC and its Standing Committee, the special committees diligently studied, deliberated on and prepared bills, actively conducted inspections of the enforcement of laws, research on special topics, a follow-up oversight, and strengthened deliberation of proposals put forward by NPC deputies and oversight over the handling of their suggestions, thereby contributing to improving the NPC's work. The bodies of the NPC continued to improve themselves in terms of political integrity, work style, institutions, and competence. And their officials and staff further fortified their ideals and convictions and improved their conduct. All the efforts in this regard have provided an excellent guarantee for serving the NPC and its Standing Committee. Fellow deputies, the Standing Committee's achievements and progress last year were made under the correct leadership of the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as General Secretary and are the result of the joint efforts of hard work of NPC deputies, members of the NPC Standing Committee and special committees, and the staff of the bodies of the NPC. The active help and close cooperation of the State Council, the Supreme People's Court, the Supreme People's Procuratorate, and the local People's Congresses at all levels and their standing committees. And the full trust and support of the people of all of China's ethnic groups. On behalf of the NPC Standing Committee, I would like to express sincere gratitude to you all. We're keenly aware that the Standing Committee's work still leaves a lot to be desired in terms of the requirement for developing the cause of the party and the country, and in terms of the expectations of the deputies and the Chinese people. Some laws are not practical or effective enough to solve real problems. In some cases, oversight work is either not complete or not conducted effectively. The scope of work related to deputies needs to be expanded, while the way we carry out this work needs to be diversified. We will willingly accept the oversight of deputies and the general public, seek comments and suggestions from all sectors of society with an open mind, and constantly strengthen and improve the work of the NPC so that we better perform our functions and powers and carry out our work in accordance with the law.
Major tasks for this year. In 2015, the overall requirements for the work of the NPC Standing Committee are as follows. Comprehensively implement the guidelines of the 18th National Party Congress and the 3rd and 4th plenary sessions of the 18th CPC Central Committee. Hold high the great banner of the socialism with the Chinese characteristics. Follow the guidance of Deng Xiaoping theory the important thought of three represents, the scientific outlook on development, put into practice the guiding principles from General Secretary Xi Jinping's major speeches, remain committed to integrating leadership by the party, the position of the people as masters of the country, and the law-based governance of the country, and focus on the strategic goals of finishing building a moderately prosperous society in all aspects, comprehensively deepening reform, fully advancing law-based governance of China, and practicing strict governance of the whole party as we perform our functions and powers and carry out our work in accordance with the law. We also need to give full play to the NPC's role as the highest organ of state power in building China into a socialist rule of law country and uphold the authority of constitution and other laws. First, improving the socialist system of laws with Chinese characteristics, at the heart of which is the Constitution. As we implement the guidelines of the 4th plenary session of the 18th CPC Central Committee, we need to begin with legislation, focusing on the key task of improving the quality of legislation. We will coordinate our legislative work with the country's decisions on reform to make sure that all of our country's major reforms have a legal basis and that legislative work is carried out proactively to meet the needs. First, we will improve the system for enforcing the Constitution and for overseeing its enforcement. Enforcing the Constitution is a priority and a fundamental task in building China into a socialist rule of law country. Spreading knowledge about the Constitution and establishing and safeguarding its authority among the public must be viewed as major task in full advancing the law-based governance of the law, which should be carried out properly and without delay. We will improve the mechanism by which the NPC and its Standing Committee oversee the enforcement of the Constitution, putting in place sound procedures and mechanisms to interpret the Constitution and develop a system of pledging allegiance to the Constitution for officials assuming office. We will work hard to ensure proper record-keeping and review of normative documents, and to see that, in accordance with the legal procedures, any normative document that conflicts with the Constitution or other laws is rescinded or corrected. 2. We will advance legislation in key areas. Keeping closely in mind the practical needs in the country's economic and social development, we will adopt a coordinated approach with clear priorities and establish legislative tasks in a well-conceived way. First, we will improve the system of laws for socialist market economy. We will make revisions to the following laws: the securities laws, the law on promoting the application of scientific and technological advances, the seed law, the law on the contracting of rural land, and the advertising law. Second, we will improve legislation on democracy. We will revise the electoral law for the National People's Congress and local People's Congresses, the organic law of the local People's Congresses and local People's Governments, the law on deputies to the National People's Congress and deputies to local People's Congresses, the law on administrative review. We will develop national legislation to fight corruption and work out revisions to the law on administrative supervision. Third, we will push forward the legislation concerning social issues. We will work on a community correction law, an anti-domestic violence law, a law on traditional Chinese medicine, and a charity law. We will revise the food safety law and the law on the Red Cross Society and pass Amendment 9 to the criminal law. Fourth, we will advance legislation concerning cultural, educational, and ecological issues, work to formulate a law for guaranteeing public cultural services and a law on national medals and titles of honor, and revise the air pollution prevention and control law as well as educational law. Fifth, we will uphold the rule of law in our efforts to advance national security. We will formulate a national security law, an anti-terrorism law, a law on the management of international NGOs in China, and cyber security law. Thirdly, we will improve our legislative systems and mechanisms. The NPC and its Standing Committee will continue to play the dominant role in legislative work. We will establish a mechanism by which the NPC special committees and the working committees of the NPC Standing Committee organize relevant departments to participate in the drafting of major laws, and establish a sound system whereby specialists act as legislative advisors to the special committees of People's Congresses and to the working committees of the standing committees of People's Congresses. By strengthening the ranks of those working on legislation, we will improve our capacity for carrying out legislative work. We will ensure that NPC better organizes and coordinates legislative work and improve the channels and ways through which legislative bodies and lead legislation and other sectors of the society participate systematically. We will expand the role played by NPC deputies in the drafting and revising of laws by extensively consulting with them and then following up on and adopting their useful suggestions. We will hold consultations on legislation with a view to putting into practice the guidelines for strengthening the development of socialist consultative democracy. We will improve the mechanisms by which legislative bodies communicate with the general public, expand the channel for citizen systematic participation in the legislative process, and enhance the publicity of legislative work. We will create a better mechanism for soliciting comments on legislation from local people's congresses and explore ways of staying connected to local communities on legislative issues. Two, strengthening oversight over compliance of the laws and over the work of the State Council, the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate. General Secretary Xi Jinping stated that the important principle behind the system, People's Congresses, and the basic requirement of its institutional design are to subject the exercise of power by all state organs and their employees to constraints and oversight. The Standing Committee must perform its constitutional and legal duties of oversight and safeguard the unity, sanity and authority of the country's legal system. First, we will increase efforts to monitor and inspect compliance with the laws. Adapting to the new situation and fully advancing the law-based governance of the country, we will facilitate the State Council's efforts towards carrying out administration in accordance with the law and the efforts of the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate to administer justice in an impartial way, ensuring that laws are enforced properly and effectively. We will arrange inspections of the compliances with the law on prevention and control of water pollution, the law on protection of consumers' rights and interests, agricultural law, the law on regional ethnic autonomy, the law on guaranteeing the rights and interests of senior citizens, and the law on vocational education. Two, we will step up oversight over the work of the State Council, the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate. Adapting to the new normals in the country's economic development, we will give impetus to implementing the major policies and plans of the CPC Central Committee. We will listen to and deliberate on reports from the State Council regarding its work and progress in promoting deeper integrated development of information technology and industrialization through the application of new advances in information technology, facilitating development of the pilot free trade zone, developing the system of public cultural services, stabilizing and improving rural land contract relations, and deepening reform of the medical and health care system. We will strengthen oversight over judicial activities and listen to and deliberate on the Supreme People's Court's report on judgments in administrative cases and the Supreme People's Procuratorate report on its oversight over the enforcement of panel decisions. Three, we will strengthen oversight over budgets and final accounts. Examining and approving government budgets and final accounts and overseeing the implementation of budgets are legally mandated powers of all levels of People's Congresses and their standing committees. The revised budget law has made new provisions and set forth new requirements concerning the scope of government budgets and final accounts subject to review and oversight. The review procedures and areas of priority and the bodies charged with exercising oversight and their responsibilities. We will make the most of the opportunity that comes with implementing the revised budget law to earnestly strengthen review and oversight over budgets and final accounts. We will listen to and deliberate over reports on the government's final accounts, auditing work and implementation of budget, and review and approve the central government's final accounts for 2014. We will listen to and deliberate on a report from the State Council on strengthening the management of government debts and carry out research on how to improve budgeting for state capital operations. We will continue to explore ways to improve oversight work in order to make it more targeted and effective. We will strengthen the role of special inquiries and carry out special inquiries during our listening to and deliberation over reports on inspections of the enforcement of the law, on the prevention and control of water pollution, and the law on vocational education. We will strengthen follow-up oversight and make arrangements for listening to and deliberating on the State Council's feedback report on how it has responded to our report on inspections of the enforcement of law on prevention and control of air pollution and our comments, as well as its report on its work to correct the serious problems uncovered through auditing. We will carry out researches on certain major issues in compiling the 13th Five-Year Plan and make arrangements for listening to and deliberating on the reports produced therein.
Third, deepening and expanding work related to deputies. General Secretary Xi Jinping has made it clear that state organs at all levels and their employees must use their authority and perform their duties to benefit and serve the people. Adopt the idea that strengthening ties with the deputies to people's congresses and the general public is an integral part of being responsible to the people and accepting their oversight. The Standing Committee must take the lead in conscientiously putting these requirements into practice, actively respond to people's concerns by strengthening contact with them, and NPC deputies in more areas and through a wider variety of channels. Work hard to answer people's calls, voluntarily accept the oversight of the people, and constantly improve the work of the NPC. We will uphold and improve the system by which members of the Chairperson's Council and Standing Committee maintain direct contact with NPC deputies and support and ensure deputies' efforts to listen extensively to the people's suggestions regarding the legislative and oversight topics of the Standing Committee and proactively deliver these suggestions to the Standing Committee. We'll see that the Standing Committee, the special committees, and the working committees inform deputies of the important developments in the work of the NPC and solicit their comments and suggestions on these developments. We'll see to it that the State Council, the Supreme People's Court, and the Supreme People's Procuratorate hold forums for NPC deputies at regular or irregular intervals to listen to deputies' views, and thus expand the avenues by which deputies learn about state affairs and developments. We'll introduce guidelines on helping deputies maintain contact with the people in order to foster closer ties between deputies and the people. We'll set up a platform for NPC deputies to better perform their duties, to encourage them to participate in activities of the liaison offices of the respective local people's congresses. Through these efforts to extensively and directly listen to the people's suggestions and to give expression to social conditions and public sentiment. We'll be able to better pull together and draw from the wisdom of the people. We'll organize NPC deputies formed from relevant sectors to carry out research on issues of wide public concern. We'll give full play to the role of deputies and strengthen our capacity to help them perform their duties in accordance with the law. We'll improve the system of study and training for deputies as well as mechanisms to raise their ability and professional competence. We'll refine the mechanism for deliberating on deputies' proposals and better integrate the deliberation of their proposals with legislative work. We'll improve the mechanisms for handling deputy suggestions by helping the organizations to which deputy suggestions are referred to strengthen direct communication on contact with deputies so that these organizations can effectively improve their work and relevant policies to solve problems. We'll actively and steadily make public the suggestions of deputies and outcomes they produce. will improve deputies' political integrity and conduct, support electoral bodies improving their mechanisms, and monitor and encourage deputies in the performance of their duties so that they work diligently and in accordance with the law. The case of vote buying that occurred in the city of Hengyang, Hunan province, was severely dealt with in accordance with the law. We must take this profound lesson to heart and improve relevant institutions to close all loopholes. We must effectively strengthen the party's leadership over the election of deputies to people's congresses. Be strict in the election of deputies, follow procedures strictly in accordance with the law. Make full use of the role of the standing committees of people's congresses at all levels. Improve the mechanisms for reviewing deputies' qualifications. And tighten oversight over the whole process of electing deputies. We'll do our best in carrying out the NPC's foreign relations work in light of the overall plans of the CPC Central Committee. We'll strengthen the mechanisms for regular exchanges with foreign parliaments and congresses, increase our friendly foreign contacts at all levels so as to consolidate the social foundation and public support for developing long-term stable relations. We'll work to create a favorable external environment for domestic development, play an active and positive role in accelerating the country's pace of going global and protecting China's legitimate rights and interests overseas. We will make solid steps forward in strengthening the Standing Committee's self-improvement, increase our sense of political responsibility as representatives of the people in exercising the power of managing the country, and concentrate our work and efforts on implementing the CPC Central Committee's major policies and plans. We'll follow the principle of rule of law in our thinking and actions to improve and develop the work of the NPC. And play an exemplary role in respecting, studying, abiding by, and applying the law. We'll put in place long-term mechanisms for making persistent efforts to improve the manner in which we carry out our work. We'll improve the bodies of the NPC, build a highly competent team devoted to legislative work and the work of the NPC. The bodies of the NPC must support the work of the Discipline Inspection Group sent to them by the CPC Central Commission for Discipline Inspection. Fellow deputies, the mission that this age has tasked us with is honorable yet formidable, and expectations that the people have of us are great and deep felt. Let us rally closely around the CPC Central Committee with Comrade Xi Jinping as General Secretary as we work to break new ground and make solid progress. Let us make full use of the important role of the NPC and the Standing Committee as we advance in the great course of finishing building a moderately prosperous society in all respects, comprehensively deepening reform, fully advancing law-based governance of the country, and practicing strict governance of the whole party. Let us work hard to make new contributions toward achieving the two centenary goals and realizing the Chinese dream of the great rejuvenation of the Chinese nation.
And that is a work report by Chairman of the National People's Congress Standing Committee, Zhang Dejiang's work report inside the Great Hall of the People. And he covered a lot of issues, including the achievements in 2014, including an establishment and also revision of several laws. He also touched upon several tasks in the year 2015, including advancing the legislation in key areas, including financial sectors, including rural areas, food safety, environmental protection, some of the key areas that are really concerned by the public opinion. And also, he says the NPC Standing Committee will step up oversight of the work of the State Council, as well as the Supreme People's Court and the Supreme People's Procuratorate. And here in the studio again are Professor Li Zhaojie from Tsinghua University and Mr. Edward Lehman from Lehman, Lee and Xu. Welcome to our program again. Let's talk about some of the issues touched upon in this work report. It's an hour and a half of report inside the Great Hall of People. What impressed you the most? Let's start with you, Edward.
Yeah, well, I think looking forward to 2015 it impressed me that where they want to go, and hopefully, I mean, the question is how will they get there. So they talked about a number of issues. One was the enforcement. I mean, the looking forward to having the Constitution being the centerpiece, having each official be sworn in and to uphold the Constitution. But at the same time, it didn't really discuss about having administrative action, would be legal actions against how to enforce those things. We haven't seen that in the Constitution. And then it went through a number of things. How do we improve the socialist economy? Went into medals and awards for people who've done well. Like you said, it talked about the securities law. I mean, they have to take a look at that in order to increase the economy and make sure that things go in a positive way. So I think it's an ambitious, it really touched on a lot of ambitious goals. The question is, how do we get there? So, but at least they're looking towards, I think, the right key things. Senior citizens, pensions, these type of things. It's also extremely important for an aging society.
All right, looking at a task for 2015, the NPC Standing Committee as well as the central government is really busy because there are a lot of challenges ahead and tasks that really need to be solved. Professor Lee.
Yeah, they have to, preoccupy themselves with all this, very, important job. And to me, I'm very impressed by the sort of, the way that they address the functions of the NPC. The NPC used to carry a very notorious reputation. Was regarded as, rubber stamp. Right now, I'm seeing that they're trying very hard to install teeth, to NPC. So the job of legislation, the job of oversight, will be step up to bring into full play their functions, and this is a very positive development.
Right, yeah. The NPC is really the broadest way possible for China's democracy, and because it makes the law, and will it be the best judge of whether the law is fully implemented or not in order to strengthen the rule of law in China?
Yeah, I mean, there should be a system of checks and balances, and that should be the court system that is saying this is constitutional or this is not constitutional. I mean, what I thought was very interesting in this is that they even named some names. When they were talking about the electoral process, there was a place that had bought votes, and they'd actually named that out. That's, again, I think is more unusual than we've seen before. But no, I think it's a good starting point, the Standing Committee and National People's Congress, but I'm not sure that being a system of checks and balances, that the court system should be that, and that's where it ultimately lies. And they must do that in order to have a system that works. It can't be just relying on the party.
Professor Lee, you've mentioned the rubber stamp. What are the best ways to give teeth to the NPC, to National People's Congress?
Well, first you have to, change the mindset of the people. That the legislative body, does matter, for a country to try to, be modernized itself, and to have a sort of, a very modernized system of state governance. Secondly, I think here, the Constitution is repeatedly highlighted in the work report. I think NPC plays a tremendous role in that it must institutionalize this mechanism to deal with the matter of constitutionality or unconstitutionality, to guarantee the supremacy of Constitution, to guarantee the Constitution must be sort of the supreme law, the law, as you said, the law of the law. Again, the quality, I would say those deputies must be, well elected. I noticed, this. I think, for this several years, some more than 30 deputies have been removed or resigned because of their involvement in corruption cases.
Yes.
So this kind of a situation must be arrested and corrected. So to let those deputies to represent the people, in the terms of genuine sense.
The one thing I just wanted to add about the rubber stamp, I mean, and I think for our international viewers, this is the common misconception about rubber stamp and about the National People's Congress. And when I've looked at it a number of years, there are things that have taken years and years to get through this process, and there are things that don't pass. I mean, the food safety law, which we were talking about today, I mean, this has been in the process for years. This is, I don't know, 9 years or some process like that. And we've seen it also with regards to the fuel tax. We've seen it with regards to tax that goes on real estate holdings. So, I mean, this is not really a rubber stamp. I mean, it's an easy paradigm to fall into and just to dismiss this, but to get it, what I think we don't understand in the West is that there's a lot of consensus that's actually built up to get to the National People's Congress and then finally pass these things. So I think the misnomer is it's a rubber stamp. I think that's the easy way out, but I think that there are issues that they're tackling, and they do it in a different way than we would in our system.
Well, we'll talk about specific laws that are expected to pass in the coming years, but let's talk about the relationship between the National People's Congress Standing Committee and also all levels of National People's Congress in China's counties and cities and province. Tell the international viewers of our channel, what are the relationship between these levels of NPCs and also how they work together? Are they working for each other or with?
It's pretty hard to use the word, for or with, because first of all, China itself is quite the complexity. We have great disparity between regions and cities.
So it really deserves some explanation.
Exactly. Yeah. So, for instance, each province has its own local NPC to fully focus on the local questions and the problems, to adopt local legislations. Those are local legislations are working within that locality. It's not nationwide. So I think the relationship between a central NPC and a local NPC cannot be seen as one is above the other. But on the other hand, the national NPC, since it's responsible for nationwide issues and questions, once the law is adopted, once the resolution is adopted, those are the law or resolution to be followed nationwidely.
And how does motions move up the levels? How does the public opinions deliver through all these layers of NPCs? Well,
I think it's through those deputies. You see, we do not have a direct election system. Those deputies of National People's Congress are elected indirectly by those local deputies of National People's Congress. So I think that those motions, put forward, first of all, are formed up and then put forward through this kind of, working relationship between those local and the central.
The NPC Standing Committee Chairman Zhang Dejiang has said that the NPC Standing Committee and also all levels of NPC will advance the legislation in key areas, especially in financial sector, in rural areas, in environmental protection industry, and also a wide range of sectors are touched upon. What specific law do you really anticipate or look forward to of legislation?
Yeah, I think obviously how they're going to take a look at the securities law. I mean, I think I will find that fascinating, because what we're looking at right now is the implementation of the new companies law. And the new companies law, I was talking about it with Professor Lee before the program, we're looking at almost an international model where it's not so much where the company is operating, but maybe which is within the borders of China, but it might be outside of China. So, for example, with Alibaba, it's a publicly traded U.S. company. It was a company that was started here in China, and within the next 3 years, they're going to take a look at
the VIE structure.
Right, exactly, and whether that's going to function or not function. That was something that really has come on very quickly, and I think by implementing that with the securities law, it'll be very interesting to see how the company law is going to develop. So for me, that's an interesting thing. But obviously, they're touching on key things such as agricultural land and how that's to be reformed. I mean, when you think about the percentage of arable land here in China, which is much smaller than the United States, vis-a-vis the number of people that live here, this is going to be a very important task as far as resources are concerned. So I think those things are kind of standing out to me as where we're going to go and what direction.
Professor Lee, what catches your attention?
I think, these days I'm, increasingly pay attention to the legislation in the area of the protection of our environment. Very importantly, the old environmental protection laws being, amended, and the amended legislation has come into force since January this year. I do hope this kind of development, will help protect, our environment, which is very, which has very, serious problems these days. Important, part of that is how to, encourage the public participation in the protection of our environment. I understand that there is a sort of a part of the spirit, and there are some articles encouraging and also legalizing the public participation, including you have to provide the right information to the public. The public has right to information regarding the environmental state. So this is I hope I can still continue to see this kind of positive development.
Yeah, as a follow-on to that, I mean, Professor Lee and I were talking a little bit. The other thing that's important is that they're talking about the charity work and the laws that might be passed for that. What we see, at least in the United States, is a lot of this is driven by not-for-profits and non-governmental organizations. And at the same time, in China, it's not very easy to be a not-for-profit or a non-governmental organization, and the environment would be one of those things, and many other things, protection of the minors, protection of the elderly.
Work safety law.
Exactly, and these are promoted a lot of times by not-for-profits and non-governmental organizations. And so with the development perhaps of the charity law and the non-governmental organization laws, that might also help the National People's Congress and the Standing Committee to be able to make this a part of a public dialogue and discussion.
Professor Lee has already mentioned the public awareness of all kinds of laws. Are the public one of the best ways to supervise the government as well as all participants of this society to follow the rule of law?
I agree with you. I think the public participation is very important, and this is actually the hardcore of the concept of democracy. We need to sort of improve our mechanism in this particular respect to let the public to be involved in decision-making process of the government. I'm glad to see that these days the deputies of the National People's Congress are more assertive. They are even sort of advised by the state apparatus. Your job is not just to listen, to sort of follow. Your job is also to criticize. You have a right to say no. I think this is a very, very positive.
Yes, the right to say no has come along so far away in China's history. Yes, and in today's NPC, it is very common to say no. It is very common to give abstentions. How does that come along, Professor Lee?
I think it's a lot of multidimensional factors contribute to this state of affairs. Education is very important. Opening to the outside world to see what is going on in other countries is also very important. So China is a part of the world. We must learn from all these positive aspects from other countries.
And Edward, you've been following the Chinese judicial system, I think, for quite a long time. It is very unusual for NPC deputy to say no inside of Congress or all levels of NPC meetings, but it is quite common now. What's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, Well, I think that's a step in the right direction. It used to be everything had to be by consensus. Don't get along to go along. And I think by being able to say no and being able now they're genuinely reviewing the facts. And the general thought process is that this is just being passed along and everyone wants to just get along and they don't want to seem obvious. So I think that people are really looking at things. And we've seen that with the judicial system as well. There were cases about the death penalty that were reversed by setting up these circuit courts, by doing all other kinds of things. They're saying we have to have a system of checks and balances that actually work. It just can't be, let's just say this is going to work and everything's going to be over. A couple of years ago, I think they said, hey, we're done writing laws. I mean, it was almost an absurd notion. But now they're still coming back and writing and saying we have to improve on these things. So, I mean, that's fantastic if someone has the intestinal fortitude to do so.
2014 was a year of deepening reform, and 2015 is considered a year of comprehensively deepen these reforms. What kind of reforms that are needed to be done inside the judicial system, also inside the NPC structure?
Well, in regard for our judicial system, I think, we have already seen those, a plan worked out by the Supreme People's Court. I hope, but first of all, I must say, as in the right direction, and I do hope that a plan, should be well implemented into realities. For the NPC work, I may come up with a very wild idea.
Go ahead.
Like the environmental protection thing, which has been occupying the Chinese people for years, and particularly with the smog thing getting worse and worse. Yeah. We do need a sort of environmental protection national strategy. I think the NPC could play a very role in mapping out that kind of national strategy for the protection of our environment.
We're really glad to see that improving the environment is really a public opinion and is already delivered by the NPC into the national level, and it has already been made into law, the environmental protection law, as well as the air pollution prevention and control law. And there's a coming law called water pollution prevention and control law. These are some of the things that the public are really looking into and looking forward to in the future.
Oh yeah. Each year, the minister for the environmental Ministry of Environmental Protection must report to the National People's Congress on an annual basis. I think that's helps quite a lot.
Right. The newly appointed Environmental Protection Minister, Mr. Chen Jining, answered a lot of questions from reporters yesterday. Reporters asked tough questions, including the air pollution and also including the soil and water pollution, which is less visible as air pollution. Do you feel that the same way, Edward?
Yeah, no, I do. I think this is the grassroots. This affects all of us who live in Beijing, all of us who live in North China, around the world, around the country. These issues are very much at the tip of everyone's tongue, and certainly with people who have children and people who are worried about their parents. So, yeah, I think this is extremely important, and I think that's why they've made environmental laws, policies a huge priority, because this is something that they really can change and do something about. We've got 20,000 more cars, for example, in Beijing on the roads every single month. I mean, so there's got to be something that's going to have to give, and they have to make changes to it, certainly.
Speaking of the specific environmental protection law, the law was not so specific in the past, so it needs revision. That's what the NPC is doing right now to strengthen who should be punished and who's responsible. And local government at all levels should be held accountable if major environment accidents occurred. What revisions can we expect in this coming year?
In terms of, I think, environmental protection, first we do need to mobilize the public to oversee, the government's job to, have to guarantee the environment is well protected. Secondly, we must also see the law enforcement in that particular, aspect. I think one of the most recent development, for the protection of the environment is to criminalize gross, violation of the law, and also gross, activity, to sort of, undermine the environment. So this kind of activities must be punished according to the law, and also I think that should highly played.
Of course, the law is there, and it's the question of implementation. Who should be responsible for supervising the implementation of such law?
Well,
for instance, like the Environmental Protection Law.
Right. I mean, obviously, it's going to have to be the court. So ultimately, I mean, administratively, obviously, it's going to be the governmental bodies. But I mean, if there's going to be a disagreement, and once the ultimate purveyor of who's going to implement it and what the outcome is going to be, whether it's going to be criminal or whether it's going to be a civil fine, is going to come from the court system eventually. And so I think the other thing that's important is taking a look at what they're reviewing the People's Procuratorate, and they're also taking a look at reviewing the Supreme Court on some of the decisions there, because that's going to be important to they're the whoever's in. It's not because you're final because you're infallible. It's infallible because you're final, and so the court system should be final with regards to the implementation of that.
Looking into the year 2015, Zhang Zhejiang has already mentioned the tasks for the NPC Standing Committee. What do you think are the challenges?
You know, the challenges are trying to actually coordinate all of these efforts, and the challenges are trying to actually find a significant way to be able to go ahead and implement them. So these are tremendous goals that they've set. But these are some of the things as we've talked about in different programs over the course of the years, which is one of the constitutional things is taking care of your parents and your parents taking care of children, and then having a law that talks about how do you have a meeting with a parent. So some of these laws and regulations are great ideas, but how does one implement them? And so those are the key issues, and how do you make it so that it actually works?
I agree. Actually, with sort of the economic, social, and cultural development in China, is what we call the stakeholders are getting more and more diversified. So we do need a mechanism to build up a social cohesion, to move together to address those daunting challenges like environmental problems, and this NPC as well as our courts, I think, play quite tremendous role in building up the social cohesion, in addressing that kind of problems.
Because we're used to a 30-decade of explosive expansion here in China, it is really a time that we should slow down and get used to the new normal that we are experiencing right now, to examine and improve some of the rule of law and also the judicial reform and all of the NPC reform and some of the improvement inside the system. It is the best time for us to do that.
Yeah, no doubt about it. But what I also see, though, is that they're trying to streamline entrepreneurship and streamline opening up of companies, and they did talk about the free trade zones and what they're going to be doing. So, I mean, that's a way in which they're going to try to expedite having entrepreneurial activities here to increase the economy, which they have to move towards as well.
Thank you very much for your analysis.
Thanks.
That was Mr. Edward Lehman as well as Professor Lee. You're watching a special coverage of the NPC and CPPCC sessions here in Beijing. It's day 6 of the 2 sessions, the National People's Congress as well as the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference. They continue to gather in the capital to review, discuss, propose, as well as approve policies. This morning, Foreign Minister Wang Yi has briefed the media, reviewing the past big year for China's diplomacy and giving the outlook on its future. The hot topics ranged from relations with major world powers to the public focuses like visa agreements. Wang Yi also highlighted major diplomatic concepts, including the One Belt and One Road initiative. As for 2015, Wang Yi says the key words will be on one focus and 2 principal lines. Have a listen to what he had to say.
The key focus in 2015 is to make all-round progress in the Belt and Road Initiative. We will further enhance policy communications with other countries, expand the conversions of shared interests, and explore effective ways of win-win cooperation.
Foreign Minister Wang Yi also praised the progress made in China-U.S. relations, saying that bilateral ties will further be strengthened during President Xi's visit to the U.S. this fall, and that sincerity can do wonders in building the new type of major power relations between China and the U.S.
The undertaking of the new model of a relationship is a pioneering effort. It will not be a smooth sailing, but it is an imperative development, because it accords to the common interests of both sides and the trends of our time. There is a Chinese saying, sincerity can do wonders. As long as the two sides show sincerity and stick to the line of no conflict and no confrontation, cementing the foundation of mutual respect, then we can expect immense possibilities of win-win cooperation between China and the United States.
The relationship between China and the U.S. is regarded both as one of the most important and one of the most delicate in the world today. It's one between a rising power and an established power. To get it right, President Xi Jinping proposed a new type of great power relations. The idea has been met with enthusiasm in China, but some in the U.S. remain skeptical. Our senior reporter and presenter Tian Wei sat down with Cui Tiankai, Chinese ambassador to the U.S., on the sidelines of the two sessions in Beijing. She asked him about the direction of the China-U.S. relations and about Xi Jinping's upcoming state visit to Washington. Have listened to their discussion.
The president is going to make a state visit to the United States, very first time since he comes into office. What is going to be the theme of this visit? How are preparations work going on right now?
I think the main theme, of course, it's still under discussion by the two sides. But I think the main theme would be the joint efforts to build up a new model of major country relationship between China and the United States.
There are different interpretations as to what this terminology really means.
There's a growing meeting of minds that we should work together to build such a new model so that there will be no conflicts, no confrontation. Conflicts of very serious kind, not day-to-day business. There will be no confrontation between the two major countries. And there will be sufficient degree of mutual respect and mutual trust.
U.S. and China agreed on a very, very significant climate change deal some time ago. Yet, we did not hear much information since then.
To be more accurate, that announcement was about the respective actions the two governments are going to take. It's not certainly not a treaty or something that will be binding on both countries, but each government will be responsible for its own policies and action. So each would have to do more follow-up on this announcement. And later this year, toward the end of this year, there will be a Paris conference, a multilateral negotiation on climate change. So both countries are in this process, and both are working very hard, both as national government and also bilaterally, and also with other countries, to make sure that the Paris conference will be a success.
With that interview between CCTV's Tian Wei and Chinese ambassador to U.S. Cui Tiankai, we end this special coverage of the two sessions here in Beijing, the China's annual political season happening here in the capital. I would like to thank again to our studio guests, Professor Li Zhaojie from Tsinghua University and Mr. Edward Lehman, the managing director from Lehman, Lee & Shi Law Firm. Thank you for your watching.